Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. It's been a while since the last quickly clarified series, so let's get right to it. So today, we'll be going into what is a wastegate, and what's the differences between an external wastegate and an internal wastegate, along with their pros and cons. Firstly though, let's start with how a turbo works to make sure you guys understand the rest. Basically, a turbocharger uses the exhaust gases coming out of the exhaust manifold to spin a turbine wheel connected to a compressor wheel that compresses air and forces air into the engine, otherwise known as boost. Since boost is created from exhaust gases spinning the turbine wheel, there has to be a way to control how much of it actually goes into the turbine housing. If all of the exhaust gases were to spin the turbine wheel, there would be no way to control how much boost is being created, and would most likely lead to one of your pistons or rods taking a quick trip through your car's hood. This is where a wastegate comes in. A wastegate is a very simple device that is essentially a valve that allows exhaust gases to bypass the turbine wheel to prevent overboosting. A wastegate spring keeps this valve shut until boost starts building. As the boost builds up, the wastegate gradually opens up and lets exhaust gases bypass the turbine wheel. For example, if your wastegate has an 8 psi spring, the wastegate will slowly open as the turbo builds boost until it fully opens up at 8 psi. Simplified, the wastegate lets exhaust gases bypass the turbo once it builds the targeted amount of boost, in order to control how much boost the turbo is making and prevent overboosting. Simple, right? Now, let's go into the two main wastegate types, internal and external. So let's start with the most common one, internal wastegates. So this right here is a TD03 turbo off of a twin turbo V6 Galant VR4, and it features, as you may have guessed, an internal wastegate. With internal wastegates, they don't really use a valve, but rather a flapper type mechanism that opens and closes the wastegate just like this. This lets the exhaust gases pass the turbine without spinning the wheel, allowing the amount of boost to be controlled. This flap and wastegate port are built right into the turbine housing, reducing cost and ease of install, hence why they are commonly used on production vehicles since it does the job of controlling boost just fine. The flap is controlled by this clevis here that is connected to a wastegate actuator that is usually connected by vacuum lines to a boost solenoid that has a vacuum line running to the intake manifold to get the manifold pressure. When the boost exceeds the target amount, the wastegate will open up by pushing this clevis here this way to open up the wastegate flap and let the exhaust gases bypass the turbine wheel and go straight into the downpipe. Unfortunately, this is a junkyard turbo, so it is kind of not really functional, and the wastegate actuator and clevis are actually jammed. But basically, when the boost exceeds the target amount, the clevis will be pushed in this direction, pushing the flap open just like this. On the other hand, external wastegates have a minor difference. This is a 38mm Tile MVS wastegate, and this is a TurboSmart 45mm Hypergate wastegate. And instead of being built right onto the turbine housing and compressor housing just like this, they are its own unit and are commonly installed on the turbo up pipe just before it enters the turbine housing. From there, their operation is fairly similar, where the wastegate opens up as boost builds, except the difference is that with external wastegates, they use a valve held by a wastegate spring that removes the need of a clevis or flapper mechanism, making them more efficient and responsive, allowing for better and more accurate boost control. Then, gases from the wastegate outlet can be routed back into the turbo downpipe or dumped straight into the atmosphere, hence why they are sometimes called screamer pipes or dump pipes. Just keep in mind that the second option may be illegal depending on where you are, so of course do your own research before making your decision. In the aftermarket, some turbos may have internal or external wastegate options, depending on your preference. However, with larger turbos designed for higher horsepower or boost pressures, they may not even come with this optional choice, meaning that you will be forced to run an external wastegate setup. Now that you've learned the basics of how these two types of wastegates work, it's time to move on to the pros and cons. Internal wastegates require much less parts than external wastegate setups. It requires less piping, less components, and take up less space. However, importantly, it is more cost and time efficient for production vehicles with turbos, as it does the job of controlling boost just fine. At stock boost levels, of course. Really, there isn't anything wrong with internal wastegates until you start modifying for more power, or if you're building a high horsepower engine. Due to the flapper design, as well as the size restriction of the wastegate port, there is a limit at which boost can be controlled precisely. Once the boost is increased, the amount of air flowing may overcome the capacity of the flapper and port, leading to overboosting or boost spiking or boost creep. This is actually what happened to my own WRX STI, where the boost would often spike up to 25 psi, despite the boost controller being set to 21 psi. The flapper mechanism simply couldn't respond quick enough to the increasing boost levels and thus exceeds the targeted boost. This is very dangerous and often happens lower in the RPM range, where the boost first begins to build, but the flapper hasn't opened quickly enough to react. These boost spikes can very quickly destroy your engine and also crack or damage the wastegate port over time, leading to problems when creating boost, specifically lag, and that your turbo will have to work harder than normal, which will potentially reduce its lifespan. At this point, you may want to consider going for an external wastegate setup. Converting an internal wastegate turbo into an external wastegate setup is actually quite simple. All you need to do is weld the flapper shut and remove the actuator mechanism and install an external wastegate onto the up pipe. However, it is not possible to convert a non-internal wastegate turbo into an internal wastegate setup because you will need a turbine housing with a flapper and wastegate port built into it. Basically, you can go from an internal wastegate design to an external wastegate one, but not the other way around. External wastegates are arguably better than internal wastegate setups in all aspects aside from cost and additional components. Due to them having a valve type mechanism rather than a flapper, it has a much faster response time, leading to better boost control as well as a much reduced chance of overboosting. External wastegate setups also allow you to run crazy boost pressures that would be impossible on an internal wastegate setup. External wastegates also help improve the efficiency of your turbo by reducing the restrictions in the exhaust, especially if you choose to dump the wastegate right into the atmosphere. On my car, I went from 310 wheel horsepower at 21 psi to 329 wheel horsepower at 19 psi, just by installing a built compressor wheel and an external wastegate setup that dumped straight into the atmosphere. However, like I said, these wastegates are often quite costly, with this tile wastegate costing just under $300 and this Turbo Smart unit costing $450. Lastly, it's important to realize that if you do dump the wastegate right into the atmosphere, your car will become incredibly loud at wide open throttle, and this may be illegal in some states. However, there is a possible solution to this, which is to simply route your wastegate back into the downpipe, as the benefits of external wastegates are still present, albeit slightly reduced. Anyways, let's recap the pros and cons of each setup. Internal wastegate setups are cheaper, require less components and space than external setups. This makes them more cost efficient and easier to produce, hence why it is commonly used by manufacturers in OE applications, as this design does the job of handling stock boost levels just fine. However, limitations in the flapper type design mean that increasing the boost pressure can lead to overboosting, boost spikes due to poor response time, as well as fractured wastegate ports from wear and heat. External wastegates, on the other hand, are much more expensive, require more components, and take up a lot more space due to the additional piping needed. However, they are able to withstand much higher boost levels and control set boosts with higher precision and response time, reducing the chance of overboosting or boost spikes, improving reliability and safety of your engine. They also reduce restrictions in the exhaust, freeing up the flow and ultimately improving efficiency. This last one kind of differs based on preference, but some people may prefer the additional noise made when the wastegate opens up, while others may not. Consider it a sort of VTEC kick when you stomp on the gas. Obviously, to each their own. Either way, hopefully this video helped show you guys the differences between internal and external wastegates, and maybe even help in making a decision for your guys' builds. If you guys enjoyed it or found this video helpful, please do leave a like and comment down below on video suggestions or feedback. Last but not least, it would mean a lot to me if you guys could hit that subscribe button. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. That's all for this video, guys. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.